This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters. I'm Chris Hensley. We have a great show lined up for you today. We have with us today Bryan Kuderna, who is a certified financial planner. Bryan, I want to say first, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and look forward to our discussion.
Absolutely, and then I'm going to share a little bit with the listeners on your bio, so they can get to know you just a little bit better. I mentioned you're a certified financial planner. You're one of New Jersey's top 10 financial professionals of 2021. You host the Kuderna podcast, and then this year you just published a book called "What Should I Do with My Money: Economic Insights to Build Wealth Amid Chaos." That's a lot.
Yeah, I've been keeping busy.
And to full disclosure here, one of the reasons that I invited you on the show is when I was looking at your podcast, I saw that you had interviewed Boss Rutten before, and then I noticed that you were into jujitsu, which I'm also into jujitsu. I said, okay, another financial advisor into jujitsu. This will be a good conversation. So
There we
full
go.
disclosure.
Awesome. Yeah, Boz is a
uh,
great guy, and yeah, Jits is it's fun. It's a great sport to keep up with.
Absolutely. And so I know not only do you do jujitsu, but you've also competed in the Ironman and other marathons as well. So I know we'll kind of dive into that.
Sure.
But let's start with, can you share a little bit about yourself? Maybe something that I haven't mentioned already with the listeners so that they can get to know you just a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit some kind of key points. I'm a Jersey boy. I was born and raised in Jersey, right by the shore. That's kind of where I'm from. I went down to Tampa for a bit to the University of Tampa, then ended up transferring back to the College of New Jersey, and ultimately that's where I graduated with a degree in finance and economics. And then always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I liked finance, I liked investing, I liked that conversation. So I just kind of about 2008, I got right into my role that I'm in today. It started as an internship, and then I just built my private practice. And like you said, kind of been juggling that with a lot of different athletic endeavors, family life. I got a wife and three kids, and our dog Kona. So yeah, it's never a dull moment.
Nice, nice. And my eyes are being drawn to the comic books behind you. I'm a big comic book fan there, so I'm going to give you a thumbs up on that as well there.
Oh, thank you.
Um, so let's dive right into it because I think you have a lot to offer the listeners as far as on the finance side for sure. In your experience as a certified financial planner, how has a lack of personal financial education in our school system impacted the financial decisions of individuals that you've worked with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I got to say, from kind of seeing the glass half full, I think things are getting better. I've seen it with my kids, and I'm sure you've heard it. There's more and more financial literacy courses that most high schoolers, have to pass before they could graduate. So, like back in my day, that didn't even exist. There was no such thing as a finance or an accounting class in high school. So I think they are making improvements in that regard. But the economy that we're living in right now is a symptom of the way people were raised and taught 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. And so it's constantly evolving. I think that when I'm out there dealing with young professionals, they have maybe a base knowledge that was better than years past. However, I think some of the more important things they're still not aware of. And what I mean by that is I might meet with, a young 25-year-old that's settling in his career, starting to do well, and they want to talk more about maybe investing in Bitcoin or a meme stock or something like that that they may even know quite a bit about. But then when we talk about, hey, how you doing with that credit card balance, or what kind of down payment you think you're putting down on your home, where do you want to move, some of these things, it's like Greek to them. And so it's almost like they're putting the cart before the horse with some of these conversations, because I think that stuff, talking about the hot stock is more exciting than talking about your credit score. So I think that's where maybe as a society we have to get back to basics, some of the boring stuff that we all need to know. And then, as a kind of side point to that, I think really impressing upon young professionals the value of the dollar. And I think the best teacher for that is starting to work early. When you're able to work at 14 or 15, I really think that kids should be. And when they get that paycheck and they're actually using their own dollars to go buy their new sweatshirt or sneakers, that just understanding the value of the dollar, you can carry that with you through your whole life. And that's not something you just get in school. So those are the things in a nutshell that I think help a young professional.
I love it. I couldn't agree with you more. We've given my son a debit card that where he gets his allowance, it's connected to the debit card. And when he asks us for something, we now say, okay, if you have to put some of your money on it, do you still want to buy it? And that the decision making changes. He's like,
Yeah,
oh wait, that's a little bit something different, right? So
yeah.
that is extremely true. You mentioned a lot, so let me unpack some of the stuff that you just told us there. You talked about the basics. You said boring, but sometimes those fundamentals and the basics are what we need, right? And you talked about, some of this younger generation um, wanting to talk about Bitcoin and meme stocks, but then, maybe not focusing on things like credit card debt and things that they need to do right up front there. So a lot of really good information there. Let's keep going here. What financial advice do you find yourself repeatedly giving to young professionals, and how does it tie into the concepts of your latest book?
Yeah, so for young professionals, I mean, even to take a step back, I'll answer this a couple ways. I have a pretty simple planning process. I always say protection first. All right, so you want to think about the things that are time sensitive, insurances, things like that. Get your house in order before you have any problems. While you're young and healthy, take care of yourself. Then the second thing is, building a good budget. How much are we saving a month? How much do we have in the rainy day fund? Things like that. Then the third item is going to be really focusing on any like toxic debt, the credit cards, the high interest debt, some stuff like that. And then the fourth one would ultimately be the growth side or wealth accumulation. And that's where we get more into retirement planning and brokerage accounts and things like that. So I start there with a young professional. Let's have a process. Let's not just bounce all over the place and kind of, tackle what tickles our fancy. Let's follow a real process here that's proven to work. So we typically start there. And where that relates to my book is in my book, I try and what should I do with my money? I put this kind of umbrella around all the most important economic issues today. And I always tell people, I'm like, if you want to have an impact with them, you got to be smart with your money. All right. If we have no money, it's like we don't have a ticket to the game. We don't get to really cast a vote, a meaningful vote, if we're sitting on the sidelines and we're not privy to what's going on in the world. And then those same things that we might want to try and be able to affect, they're having an impact on our money every day. So it's a two-way street that I think people really ought to get educated on, both the micro and the macro, and understand how those kind of go back and forth, to really impact your everyday decisions.
I love it. I love it. So, what you're talking about, you said micro and macro, but in the way that you describe it in the book is the umbrella, and you're kind of putting everything into the context of the different economic issues that are currently going on, but you give them a process which involves number one, protection, two, budgeting, which everybody hates budgeting, but it's so necessary, right?
Yeah.
Toxic debt, talking about toxic debt, and then ultimately growth and the growth side, whether that's retirement, brokerage accounts, stocks, what have you. I know a lot of times people like to start backwards. They want to come in and start talking about the stocks and the growth first, and
Yeah.
these fundamentals, this process that you have in place to help them really is a great thing to get them on the
Yeah.
right track.
And
I'm gonna,
even if I could just kind of
yeah,
like on that same point, a lot of people might be surprised. My book is titled "What Should I Do with My Money?" And personal finance is the very last chapter of the book. And at face value, you'd say, I don't get it. That seems like backwards. But what I lead in with, what I try and encourage my readers to understand, is that whenever I sit down with a client, whether they're just getting started or they got $10 million, they say, hey, what should I do with my money? I give them that answer, all right, which always is different based on who's across from me. And then inevitably, they're always going to say, okay, well, why? And then I start to answer that why. And then they say, all right, that makes sense, but why this? Why that? And then those answers dive into economics. All right. And that's where all of a sudden we're talking about foreign issues, we're talking about taxes, we're talking about politics. And so that's why the bulk of the book is kind of some of that other stuff that we need to understand. And then we can answer that why question. And when we do, then our financial moves start to make a lot more sense.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm gonna pivot a little bit from what we're talking about because earlier we mentioned a lot of different hats that you're wearing. How do you balance the demands of being an entrepreneur, an author, speaker with your personal life and then staying physically active?
Yeah, so it's time management is the main thing. In routine, I think a lot of the very successful people I've seen have a routine that they stick to, and it's something that I appreciate. Like I try and tell, folks that I've mentored or people that ask me like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I think a routine is so key because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of your day. And there's so many different things competing for our time that if we don't have that to-do list or that roadmap, we can just chew through half a day and then you look back and say, what did I do? I can't really remember what I did today. So I like to wake up early. I wake up, the same time that our kids are getting off to school, 6 o'clock in the morning. I do the dishes. That kind of
Nice.
gets me going. And then from there, something I actually heard in a interview with Hugh Jackman, the guy that plays Wolverine, and he said before he hits the chaos of the day, he likes to get a cup of coffee and then just read for no other purpose than pleasure for like 30 minutes. And so I do that before the whole day starts. Whatever book I'm reading, I'll just sit down with a cup of coffee, read, be by myself for 30 minutes, enjoy that, start my day out, kind of feeling good. And then from there, that's where I start to attack the day with, and it's based on my schedule. It could be business, meetings, podcasts, carve out maybe a few hours for writing. And then the gym is either happening because I'm, an entrepreneur, I kind of customize my schedule. So it could be
Yeah.
first thing in the morning one day, or it could
Yeah.
be in the lunch hour, that varies, but I always build fitness, into my day.
I love it. I love it. I'm smiling here. Just the routine that you have in the morning, these rituals, these are fascinating to me. Waking up early. I might have to edit out the part about doing dishes. I'm worried my wife might hear that and then hold me to that standard. Just joking. But reading, just being an avid reader every day. Now, do you prefer a regular tactile physical book, or do you do the Kindle, or how do you read when you read a little bit of both? Or
Yeah, so I just maybe I'm old school. Like I just love having a good book, paperback
yeah,
book, and I'm flipping pages in my hands.
yeah,
Because yeah, I got some of my
yeah.
books here in my bookcase, and it's just how I've always done it. And what I used to do, maybe the reason why I'm kind of a little versed to the Kindle is when I was reading like in high school, college, and shortly thereafter, every book I read, I had to have a highlighter in my hand. And I used to read a ton of nonfiction. And so I liked it was almost like active reading where I'd go through and if I saw a quote or an idea that I was like, oh, I love it, I would highlight it. And then it's like I always kind of had it there, like in my memory. Where I feel like that might be a little more difficult to go grab the Kindle off the shelf and have that. Now I don't really do that as much anymore. Now I'm kind of a little more laid back with my reading, but that's just the way I do it.
Love it. No, before I was well, while I was in college, I managed a bookstore, old Super Crown book. So I'm a book person. I love just being around books. So that's a great answer there. Let's talk a little bit about in our industry in financial planning. How has the rise of fintech affected traditional financial planning, and what tools or apps do you see as game changers in the industry?
Yep. So I think, tech is invading every space. I mean, there's actually a chapter in my book just called Tech, and that's what we get into is it's everywhere. It doesn't matter what field that you're in. And I think a lot of the barriers to entry to get some knowledge or to, kind of take part in all the different areas of the economy have been taken away or knocked down by tech. You know, back in the day, you know, you wanted to go buy a stock, you might have to actually pick up a phone, call a broker, have at least $10,000 to then go place this trade. It was a process that was kind of off limits for most Americans or most people out there. Nowadays, you know, with tech, it's like there's good and bad. I mean, the good thing, yes, it's now available so many different things to the masses. But on the flip side, I always say there's a lot of information out there, but there's not always a lot of wisdom. And so you could go tune into one of 1,000 podcasts or read one of 1,000 blogs that somebody out there, maybe they're credentialed or maybe they literally just opened it today, this morning, and they're just spouting their opinions off there. And then because of technology, somebody can gather that information or that knowledge, if you will, and then they can actually act on it with a couple clicks of a button on their phone. They could open up a new account with some wirehouse with no minimum, and then boom, they're actually investing real money in something that some guy they never met before was just going off about on a tangent on his blog. And so, what I think is just as a financial advisor, you're seeing more of that. The questions that I'm getting is just kind of an overwhelmed audience that there's so much noise out there from major media and the 24/7 news networks to the blogs, the podcasts, the the Reddit feeds, you name it. There's so much out there that I think a lot of individuals are just like, I don't know where to start. I don't know which one to read, which one to follow, but they want to do something. And sometimes, they either have paralysis by analysis or they might go the other direction and they make a mistake thinking they knew something that perhaps they misunderstood. So it's having a huge impact, and I think that's where the financial advisor or the CFP can come back in and say, okay, it's good you're educating, it's good you're self-educating, but now let's kind of cut through some of this to find out facts from fiction.
I love it. I'm going to piggyback off of that because everything you just said, totally agree with that. You gave, two choices. People sometimes are got paralysis by analysis, right? They're over analytic and then they do nothing, or they are proactive but they make bad choices, right?
Yeah.
And you talked about financial noise. Really, technology is acting as a magnifier for that, right?
Mhm.
You and I both know that anybody can go out there and call them. This is one of my biggest pet peeves, financial coach, right, or money coach.
Yep.
You could call yourself that, but if you don't have the licensing, if you don't have the experience, you're really entering bad stuff out into the atmosphere here, where people
Yep.
can act on it and make some really poor decisions there. So we started by talking about technology, and I could see how technology is just in some ways making that worse for sure. So these are all important reasons for people to tap an expert like yourself on the shoulder and say, hey, we need help, especially the getting rid of that financial noise, that filter is a
Mhm.
huge thing. So thank you for doing what you're doing there.
Yep.
Let's keep talking about technology there, and go just a little bit further, because now you can't get on the internet without seeing something about AI. Where do you see the role of human financial advisors heading into the age of robo advisors and or AI?
Yep. So it's changing. I mean, that goes without saying. I think a lot of the things that a financial advisor used to be, again, going back to those barriers of entry, they used to kind of hold a key to open up the gate to say, okay, now you can invest or you could get this product or whatever it may be. Since all those doors are effectively open through technology, I think a lot of these things are becoming a commodity where whatever insurance or whatever investment a tenured CFP could show, yeah, you can go get them on the internet or someone day one could provide for you. So when you couple the availability factor also with the information that's brought about by AI or robo advisors and things, I think that again, I think that there's a use for it. Okay, but I think that the person at the end of the day is got to make a decision. All right, the robo advisor isn't going to do it all for them. Eventually, you're going to have to say, okay, I'm handing over my money into whatever platform, or I'm answering a questionnaire, And then I think that's just one thing. I always say there's the financial element or component, and then there's the emotional side. And when you kind of draw up a plan in a laboratory, maybe AI or a robo advisor can do that. But then when the world starts to spin and life unfolds, now there's all these different things going on that maybe we weren't ready for. And it's almost like we need a friend. We need someone to say, hey, Joe, hey, Chris, you may not want to do this right now, or maybe you should consider this. And have candid conversations of the pros and cons of all these different decisions, and that's where AI can get better and better, but it's never going to be human. And that's where I'm not worried about my job. That's what I
Right.
tell people. My job will change, and maybe there's certain accounts that will be available through other avenues. But I'm not at all worried about being put out of business by robots that will never be a person that we can connect to.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, that's the exact feeling I had. The technology part of it, that's a whole nother bigger discussion. But as far as it relating to us as financial advisors, they talked about robo advisors for many years now, and what happened there? You've got
Yeah,
some people using robo advisors, but it was almost a non-event for my practice, like
yeah. It's true.
personally.
And
So
just as almost like proof of that, I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, hey, Bry, what's your take on this robo advisor or this platform or this piece of AI? And I'm like, just if you have to come and ask me for my opinion on it, it's almost not really doing its job because it hasn't sold you. It hasn't gained your trust and your confidence that you need to come back to a human for a human to say, okay, use it, but just use it for this. That's where ultimately it's a tool. All right. It's almost like if I'm a carpenter and my biggest customer found a hammer, I'm not out of a job. Okay. Now I can go show them how to use that hammer, but it's I know that's kind of a trivial analogy, but that's what it is. It's just another tool.
yep. I totally agree with that. I see it as a tool. It might even amplify some of the things that we're doing, but it's not going to put us out of business there. So I would just piggyback and on that. I'd agree with you 100%. I'm going to move a little bit. I'm going to step back a little bit and go back to the book here. I know that you talk about building wealth amid chaos in
Mhm.
the book. Can you provide an example of a financial principle that's particularly relevant in today's uncertain economic climate? Sorry.
Sure, sure. So I think one of the timeless ones that you hear about is, dollar cost averaging. That might be a good example of, and all that, for people who don't know, that's making systematic investments, whether it's every month or every quarter, so that you're taking the emotion, you're taking the guesswork out of your plan, and you're just essentially following a process. And then the idea of dollar cost averaging is that if we put in the same amount in the same periods, we're buying less of the market when it's at a high, and then we're buying more of the market when it's at a low, and we're kind of smoothing these entry points. So the reason I just throw that one out there is, again, it's removing emotion, and it's just saying let's just follow the exercise. So it's funny when I came up with the title of my book. We had what should I do with my money? My publisher McGraw Hill, they loved it. Everyone was like, that's great. The subtitle, we went back and forth, and we had building wealth amid chaos. And one of the editors was like, all right, well, as we're starting to write this, in the middle of COVID, it's perfect. I mean, it's as chaotic as hell. But what happens when we get out of COVID? And I was like, don't worry, it will be chaotic because that's what the world is. It never, ever stops. And so I think that's what I try and tell people is like, you turn on the news tonight, you can flip the channel and in 5 minutes find something inspiring and hopeful that will energize you to the nth degree. And then you could find something so terrible that you could just dive into a depression. And you could do that every day. So I think that's kind of the premise of the book is like, let's take some of the emotion and the opinion and the kind of two sides of the coin that are constantly fighting each other. Let's get rid of all of that and just look at the empirical evidence and the story of what's going on, And then along the way, focus on what you can control. And, when you do that, and dollar cost averaging is just one example, we're following a process where now we're taking that emotion out, and chaos all of a sudden doesn't mean that much to us. And we can say, all right, chaos is going to present opportunity instead of just these never ending threats that we want to panic over.
I love it. Focusing on what you can control. You gave us the example of dollar cost averaging, which is a huge one. I mean, a lot of like you said, it's taking the emotion out of it and just having people exert that consistent, repeatable exercise of saving and putting money aside.
Mhm.
We're bumping towards the end of the half hour here. This half hour is going by really, really quick. So I want to ask a few questions here. But in
Sure.
the Ironman, how has being an Ironman and pursuing athletic challenges affected your career?
Yeah, so I think it always just provides kind of like a just stability to life for me. You have all these different things that you're trying to attack, and some days you have good days, other days you have bad days. But to be able to come back to something that's just so kind of basic, like sports or running, even, these are things that I've done since I was a kid. Sports was always a big deal, so I never wanted to lose all of that. So when I was done playing competitive sports after college, I was just kind of searching for like that next thing, and that's where on a whim, I signed up for the National Marathon in DC. I went and I did that, and I was like, all right, I kind of checked that box. And then everyone's like, oh, how are you going to outdo that? That kind of came out of left field. So then the next New Year's resolution was like, all right, I'll try an Ironman. I've never done any triathlon or anything like it. And I think just doing those, if I look at back in like 2015, the year that I did the Ironman, it was a great year in business. And a lot of people said, dude, you're training for like the hardest thing in the world. How do you even, do you even go to the office? And I'm like, yeah, I'm working better than ever because when I'm at the office, I'm 100% dialed in. And then when I leave the office, it's training time. And it's like you re energize the physical side, then you re energize the mental side, and you go back and forth. And it's kind of like everything rises together. So that's where I'm just such a huge proponent of just fitness in general.
Bryan, thank you so much for being on the show. You shared a lot of really good information with us today. Is there something that I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Um, no, I think we kind of covered a lot there. I think what I would just tell listeners is, find out what you're passionate about. That should be something you kind of reevaluate from time to time. Just kind of take the pulse and say, hey, am I on track for ultimately what I want to be doing with life? I know that's a big thing, but I think it's good to kind of have those deep conversations or introspective thoughts from time to time. So just kind of touch base with yourself, and then kind of bring it back to the basics and have that routine. And I please encourage everybody to go check out my book again called "What Should I Do with My Money." I talk not just about wealth in the context of money, but wealth as a state of well-being, and that's where I think it's applicable to everyone. And if you like history, if you like economics, then you'll really enjoy the read.
I love it. I love it. And Bryan, thank you so much for being on the show. One very last question for listeners who'd like to contact you. You did share with us how, where to, or to the book and where do they find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Sure, sure. So they can check out my website is www.bryankuderna.com. So if they check that out, they can see a lot of what I have going on. They could sign up for my newsletter. It's called Weekly Wealthy Wisdoms. They're more than welcome to check that out. Free newsletter every Monday. And then anywhere on social media, if you search Kuderna, I'm probably going to pop right up.
And you have the podcast as well. So if they search Kuderna, they might hear the YouTube version of it or the MP3. Either way, they can find you
Yep.
there.
Yeah,
Bryan,
that's
thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for sharing with us today. Have a good rest of the day.
all right. Thanks a lot, Chris. Take care.